Heart pounding, Nate Morgan tasted blood and gunpowder on his tongue as he knelt in the dust. Dawn's first light cut through the gun smoke hanging in the cold air. 6 rifles trained on his chest. A rifle lever clicked behind him. He was outnumbered. Cattle Baron Cyrus McGraw's posse formed a noose around the ranch. One wrong move and they'd never see sunrise. Less than a day ago, he'd thrown open his door to 2 desperate orphans. Now that act of mercy had led him here, at gunpoint, at dawn. Late afternoon sun stretched Nate's shadow across the dirt of Red Creek's main street. A knot of townsfolk gathered outside the livery stable, drawn by angry shouts and a horse's panicked whinny. Nate pushed through the crowd, boots crunching on trampled feed. The air stank of manure and sweat, and he could almost taste the fear in the air. In the center of the commotion, 2 ranch hands held a pair of ragged orphans. One was a wiry boy of about 12, trapped in a bruising grip. The other, a young woman around 18, was pinned to a post with her wrists bound by rough rope. Her voice crackled with fury as she snarled at the men, "Touch my brother again and I'll gut you." One of the men barked a laugh and yanked the ropes tighter, making her gasp. The boy struggled in vain. The other hand gripped him by the collar, shaking him until he cried out. Cyrus McGraw watched from atop a black stallion, eyes cold beneath the brim of his hat. The cattle baron's lip curled. "Little thieves," he spat. "Caught 'em trying to steal my mare. In this territory, horse theft means hanging." A few onlookers nodded grimly. The crowd murmured in cruel agreement. Nate's jaw tightened. He saw the boy's cheeks wet with tears and the girl's chin defiantly raised. Something fierce awoke in his chest. "Let them go," Nate said, stepping forward. His voice cut through the murmurs. A hush fell. Cyrus's ranch hands glared, hands hovering near their revolvers. "Stay out of this, Morgan," Cyrus snarled. "These whelps have earned their noose." Nate raised his hands calmly, showing no weapon. "They're children," he said steady. "Haven't enough people died out here." Cyrus stomped toward Nate, spurs jangling. "You've got gall thinking a small-time rancher like you can defy me." He nodded to his man with a noose. "Someone's got to make an example of these thieves. Fear keeps folks in line." Nate's heart thumped against his ribs. He noticed the sun bleeding low towards the horizon, maybe an hour of daylight left. "Then you'll have to go through me," he said quietly, planting himself in front of the shaking boy. A murmur rippled through the bystanders. The Baron snarled, eyes narrowed. "Money! This isn't about money, it's principle." Cyrus nodded to a hired gun holding a coil of rope. "String 'em up." Nate's pulse pounded in his ears, but slowly he reached into his coat and pulled out a small leather pouch. He dumped a handful of silver coins at Cyrus's feet. "Take it." "Let them go," Nate said. Cyrus glared long and hard. Then he spat and jerked his chin at his men. The hired hands sawed through the girl's ropes and shoved her forward. Another thug hurled the boy to the dirt at Nate's feet. Nate hauled the boy upright as the girl stumbled forward, rubbing her raw wrists and glaring at everyone. Cyrus swung back into his saddle. Before he wheeled his horse around, he fixed Nate with a murderous glare. "Sunrise comes fast, Morgan," he hissed. "By dawn, you'll wish you never crossed me." He spat in the dust and galloped off, his posse following in a thunder of hooves. Cyrus and his men thundered off. The onlookers quickly dispersed, murmuring among themselves. Nate stood with the orphans pressed close at his sides, a protective instinct he hadn't felt in years. The young woman's stare was sharp and guarded, the boy clinging to her sleeve. Nate exhaled slowly. He'd saved them from the noose, but Cyrus McGraw's parting threat lingered in the air, like powder smoke. What price would mercy demand by morning? Keep watching to see if his act of mercy would cost him everything. Night fell heavy and restless over Nate's ranch. Inside the dimly lit cabin, Cassie, the orphan girl, sat near the hearth with her little brother Billy, wrapped in a blanket at her side. Nate hung up his hat, and Colt, trying not to wince at the pain in his knuckles. Adrenaline had masked the sting of a few splinters from Cyrus's warning shot in town. Jed stood on the porch with a shotgun in hand. The grizzled ranch hand had been Nate's friend and moral compass for years. He shook his head as Nate shut the door. "Cyrus ain't gonna like this, son," he warned in a low voice. Rain started tapping on the roof, the leading edge of a storm. Jed set the shotgun by the doorframe within easy reach. "You know he'll come by morning." Nate nodded, stomach tight. "I know." He ran a hand over the scarred stock of a rifle mounted above the mantel, a weapon he hadn't fired in years. "We'll manage," he muttered, more confident than he felt. Meanwhile, Cassie was eyeing Nate warily from her spot by the fire. Her face was smudged with dirt and strain. At last she broke the silence. "We never asked for your help," she snapped, voice sharp as a knife. The boy looked up at her, confused. "Cass, he saved us," he whispered. Cassie shushed him gently, never breaking her glare at Nate. "If you think I owe you thanks, you're mistaken," she continued, chin raised. "You got your show in town, playing the hero. Don't expect me to fall at your feet." Nate sighed and stepped forward, keeping his voice calm as if gentling a skittish horse. "I don't want anything from you," he said quietly. He gestured to the second cot by the far wall. "You're free to go whenever you like, but it's a long ride across open range at night. My home is open to you both for tonight. Stay, rest, that's all." Cassie hesitated. She glanced at Billy's thin face, at the bruises already darkening on his arms. The boy swayed on his feet, dead tired and hungry. Finally, Cassie gave the faintest nod. "One night," she muttered. Jed breathed out and managed a crooked smile. When Jed gently draped a dry blanket around Billy's shoulders, she allowed it, without protest. Bit by bit, her rigid posture eased into weary caution. Nate stepped outside into the damp night to fetch more firewood. The storm's wind moaned across the plains, bringing the first mist of drizzle on the breeze. He gazed out at the darkness beyond the porch, wondering how many men Cyrus would bring come sunrise. Nate felt a weight settle on his chest. Years ago, he'd sworn he would never again draw his pistol in anger. But now, 2 young lives depended on him. Nate stared into the darkness, heart pounding. Dawn was only hours away, and with it, Cyrus McGraw's promised wrath. The cabin was hushed after the long day. Embers in the hearth cast faint orange light over rough-hewn walls. Outside, midnight wind rattled the window pane. Nate sat at the table, absent-mindedly cleaning his revolver by lamplight. Across from him, Cassie pulled a blanket tighter around Billy, who finally slept on the spare cot. Cassie broke the silence first. "I heard Cyrus's promise," she said quietly, eyes on the low fire. "And I know what Jed said about you giving up violence." Her gaze flicked up to the rifle above the mantel, then to Nate. "Why did you risk all this for us if you swore not to fight?" Nate drew a slow breath and pulled a tarnished silver pocket watch from his coat. He laid it on the table and flipped it open. Inside was a tiny photograph of 2 grinning young men, one of them a much younger Nate. My brother in arms, he said, tapping the image of the other man. Back then, I was about your age, running wild with him. We robbed stagecoaches, raised hell from here to El Paso. One day we bit off more than we could chew, Nate went on, eyes distant. A bank job went bad. The law caught up. My friend took a bullet helping me escape. His voice faltered. I left him behind in the dust. I thought he was dead. Maybe I just told myself that because I was too scared to go back for him. He swallowed, jaw tight. After that, I swore I'd put my guns down for good. The watch snapped shut in his hand. I came here, started this ranch, tried to bury the past. I figured maybe I could live a quiet life. A ghost of a smile crossed his lips. Then I saw you two today, and I knew I couldn't stand by. Not again. Cassie blinked, a sheen in her eyes catching the firelight. I misjudged you, she whispered. And thank you. She glanced at Billy's sleeping form, her expression softening. After our ma and pa died, I did whatever I had to so my brother wouldn't starve. I stole. We even ran with a gang for a time until the law caught up. Their leader ran off and left us to take the fall. Her voice trembled with anger at the memory. Since then, I only trusted Billy and myself. Nate stood and gently laid a wool blanket around Cassie's shoulders. She tensed, then allowed the gesture. You're not alone anymore, he said quietly. Cassie let out a long breath. Maybe, just maybe, she believed him. For a long moment, they stood together by the low fire, two scarred souls sharing a fragile peace, while the prairie wind howled outside. A low rumble of thunder rolled across the distance. Storm's coming, Nate murmured, noticing lightning flicker far off beyond the hills. The wind was picking up. Cassie pulled the blanket tighter. How long until sunrise? She asked softly. A few hours yet, Nate said. He forced a small, reassuring smile. Try to rest. I'll keep watch. Neither of them moved from that warm patch of lamplight. The first cold drops of rain began tapping on the roof as the storm neared. In the distance, thunder growled its warning. Would the dawn bring them salvation or blood? Lightning flickered, turning night into day for an instant. The storm hit full fury a few hours before dawn. Rain drumming on the roof, wind screaming through the barn rafters. Nate pressed himself against the cabin's front wall, peering out into darkness. Cassie crouched beside him with Jed's shotgun clutched tight. Inside, Billy huddled in the root cellar trapdoor, hidden under a tarp and praying. Suddenly, a shotgun blast shattered the night. Pellets tore into the log wall inches from Nate's head, spraying him with splinters. They're here, he shouted. Down by the barn, an orange glow bloomed. Despite the hammering rain, one of Cyrus's men had ignited a pile of dry hay. Flames began licking up the barn's side, casting wild shadows. Jed burst out onto the porch, rifle in hand. "Barn's on fire!" he cried over the gale. Before Nate could stop him, Jed bolted toward the barn through the mud. A muzzle flare erupted by the cattle pen. Jed staggered, clutching his middle, and collapsed into the muck. Nate roared in fury. He stepped into the storm and fired Jed's rifle toward that muzzle flash. A strangled cry told him one attacker went down. Another gunman rushed at Nate out of the darkness, pistol raised. Click. Nate's rifle was empty, but a shotgun boomed at his side. Cassie fired both barrels. The assailant screamed and crumpled as buckshot tore into his leg. The remaining attackers, seeing their ambush foiled, melted back into the night as fast as they'd come. Chest heaving, Nate glanced at Cassie. She stood firm in the rain, jaw set, the shotgun still braced at her shoulder. "Jed," Nate blurted, skidding to his knees beside the old man. Jed lay on his side by the well, rain pooling around him. Blood poured from a ragged wound in his belly. Nate pressed his palms down, trying to stanch it. "Jed, hold on, old-timer." Jed's face was ashen, his breaths shallow. Still, he managed a weak grin. "Told you," cough, "told you Cyrus would come," he wheezed. "Easy now," Nate begged, voice cracking, as he tried in vain to stop the bleeding. Jed gripped Nate's sleeve with surprising strength. "Listen, boy," he gasped, "you do what's right, no matter what. Protect your family." His fading eyes flicked to Cassie, who now knelt in the cabin doorway, shielding Billy's eyes from the scene. Nate swallowed hard. "I will," he choked out. "I won't let you down, Jed. I swear." A faint smile touched Jed's lips. Rainwater ran red off the old man's coat. He exhaled one last, shuddering breath and went still. Cassie let out a broken sob. In the doorway, Billy's wail pierced the storm as he realized what had happened. Nate bowed his head, closing Jed's eyes with trembling fingers. The blood on Nate's hands wouldn't wash away in the downpour. Not yet. By now, the barn fire was hissing under the downpour, flames dying to embers. Frightened cattle milled in their pen. Cassie hurried to pull Billy fully into the cellar, murmuring comfort as he cried. Nate rose to his feet, a strange calm coming over him. He gently picked up Jed's fallen rifle, leaving his empty Colt holstered. The man who had sworn off violence was gone, buried with Jed. In his place stood the gunslinger Nate had once been, ready for war. Lightning flashed again, reflecting in Nate's hardened eyes. "Cassie," he barked over the storm, "take Billy and stay low. Load up every weapon we got." Cassie met his gaze and nodded, determination overriding her tears. Nate spared one last glance at Jed's body as thunder rolled overhead. The storm raged on as he steeled himself. Could they withstand Cyrus's onslaught with their strongest ally gone? By first light, most of Cyrus McGraw's gang lay sprawled in the mud. Nate and Cassie, bruised and down to their last bullets, still stood defiant behind the splintered wagon in the yard. Cassie's final shot sent the cattle baron crumpling into the dirt. His vicious reign ended at sunrise. Cassie panted, smoke curling from her revolver's barrel. It was over, or so they thought. Nate had barely caught his breath when a revolver clicked behind him. He turned slowly to find himself staring down the barrel held by a gaunt, rain-soaked man. Harlan, the old friend Nate had thought dead. "You left me to die," Harlan hissed, his gun shifting toward Cassie. Nate dropped his rifle, raising his hands. "I'm sorry," he said, voice raw. "I regretted it every day since." Harlan's finger tightened on the trigger. In that heartbeat, boom! A single shot from Cassie's hidden derringer blasted through Harlan's shoulder. He howled in pain, pistol flying from his grip as he collapsed. Nate could have ended it. Instead, he stepped through the rain and helped his wounded friend to his feet. Harlan stared in disbelief, old grudges washing away in the drizzle. By the time the sheriff's posse rode in, the fight was over, and the Morgan Ranch still stood. Cyrus McGraw was dead, and Nate had kept not only the children safe, but his soul. With the sun's rising, Nate knew at last that mercy, not vengeance, had saved them all. Subscribe now to ride along for more Wild West tales of redemption.